Now, I think that we're live. Hello.
Good morning.
How are
How?
you?
But I was gonna ask you that. So I am all right. I am excited today. We have the first day of fresh air in a little over a week. So I was like, I don't see smoke in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And so naturally checked the air quality and it said it was like 40, which is we'd been in the 100 to 160 range.
Yeah.
So I was like, 40? Let me open every window and door. So if you hear the dogs barking and whatnot, just cheer because that means everybody outside.
Well, yeah. This fire season has been insane. It feels like, I mean, I don't know what was worse than paradise because I just don't know what's worse than that. But and not like it's a competition. I'm just saying this has felt very bad. Um, yeah. Well, good. I'm glad for access to fresh air and being able to breathe. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
feeling a little breeze while I'm working that's not from the fan
Hmm.
is awesome.
Yeah. No, I have the fan on, and so you probably hear it in the background, and that is not going to change. So, welcome the fan to our conversation.
Yeah, we covered that last week. Fans on.
Yes, fans on. 100% of
How are
that.
you? How are
I
you today?
I'm
And who are you?
I'm fine. I don't know, I'm a lot of things. Today I'm exhausted. I am exhausted at the continuing parade of Black Death, state sanctioned Black Death. It is, it is exhausting. And I refuse to watch the videos. I'm not watching somebody die. I don't, yeah, no. Um, and I am also, I'm also hopeful. So it's a, I'm grateful that we contain multitudes. So it is possible to hold multiple things at once. And I am, yeah. So I'm sitting in that space. And as far as who I am Jill Bates Moore. I am one half of Dahlia Law Group. We are a small law practice in Oakland, California, where our work is the work of legacy. We help people, some businesses, to protect what matters to them, to articulate it, and to really leave it as a, I don't know, as a marker of the fact that we were here, right? That's probably a really esoteric way to explain our work. But some of the tools that we use to accomplish that work are estate planning, probate, conservatorship, litigation related to those areas. Those are some of the tools that we use, but the tools are not the work. So, who are you, my dear?
I am Alicia Holland, and I am the other half of Dahlia Lager.
And I think that there was one thing probably missing. Well, that was definitely missing from your report out. We have not talked about the holiday that was yesterday. So we also have not talked about this fabulous hair. So Tony is here and saying hello. Quinora is here and saying hello. Shauna is here and saying hello. So if hi y'all, hey, if anybody else is here, reach out. Tell us who you are and how you are doing because we're actually really asking. it actually matters to us. So so tell us how you're doing. In the meantime, somebody is going to tell us about this holiday and how they spent it, and about this holiday hair. So please do carry on.
Oh, yes. Well, it was not yesterday, which I spent until the end of last week thinking it was yesterday. It's
Yesterday
actually
wasn't Monday.
Monday.
What's today?
No, Wednesday.
What is time? How do
I know. This calendar is
like
disrespectful and
how
just unruly.
how are we supposed to keep up with these things?
I told you there's a meme that said we should just go ahead and pull the band-aid off and just end daylight saving since we're all at home and confused about time anyways. We won't actually notice this year.
Nobody knows
Like,
what daylight savings time is. Like nobody knows
right.
what that is. So okay, so the holiday was
Exactly.
Monday. Do say more. Hey
Yes.
Katrina.
Which Monday was my birthday. And so
Hey.
I spent it number one, not working. And number two, like I said, since today's the first day of clear air, which meant that there wasn't a lot of going out and hanging out, even social distance with people over the weekend, which is what I had hoped to do. So instead, there was a shoe parade, and it was awesome. So I am a girl who loves my shoes and all things sparkly. And so I always do birthday shoes to mark my birthday. So something outlandish, ridiculous, sparkly, like higher than high. Just pick it. That is a birthday shoe. And so I wanted to be able to celebrate with my people, but since I can't be with them, what I asked was for everyone to wear shoes that were like the most uber extra, like who wears those on a Monday kind of a shoe, wear those on Monday in celebration. And so all day long, I got pictures from everybody's uber extra shoes, which all were amazing. So that was how I got to celebrate with that. And you can see my little flowers over there that my dad made sure to bring me. And then at the bottom, there's a little purple tiara, which my favorite babies sent me a birthday present box that I got yesterday. And it is like down to the tissue paper and bows and the envelope on the card. Like everything in the box is purple. It's like a purple book and stickers, and all the snacks are purple.
I love it.
So it's purple M&Ms and M's and purple Skittles and purple
Yes.
popcorn and my purple tiara. So I was
Oh.
looking at the plant and I was like, it needs something to decorate that little wrapper. And I was like, the tiara. That way I get to see purple sparkles through
There
my
we
day,
go. There we
which is
go.
so like uber extra.
Right
So
and good.
right
Yeah.
on theme.
Why do a little when you can do a lot? I mean,
You know,
seriously, why? Excellent. Well, in the shadow of such wonderful shenanigans, we have today's conversation, which is about trust beneficiaries. I had to think for a second. I was like, wait, what are we talking about today? And the fact that my
like
notes are right in front of me makes that even like makes that even more ridiculous. But
pish posh.
yeah, but we are talking about trust beneficiaries. Lisa has popped in. Hello, friend. How are you? Um, so trust beneficiaries are the whole reason that this whole trust thing exists, which is why um, we are starting with our exploration of the trust roles with the beneficiary. Everybody, I mean, the trustee gets a lot of shine because the trustee has a lot of responsibility, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in the coming weeks. But the beneficiary, I think, can be a not well understood role, and so we're going to start talking about that today. So far, we have explained what is required for a trust to be a trust. Right? We have done that. That was last week, and then before that, we have been talking about personal authorization documents and what those tools can be used for. So we are really continuing this sort of nitty gritty series about the basics of legacy and estate planning tools. Our hope with this series is that you'll get a substantive overview of actually what these tools are, and that you'll get some language to uh, to use as you're, as you are deciding about which of these tools might be appropriate for you or appropriate for somebody that you love, but also, because this is really important, as you are explaining these things to somebody else. That is our one ask of you, that if there is something valuable here that you have received, that you share it with somebody else at the same cost that it came to you. So,
Be super loose lipped about
yeah,
it.
yeah. So, we're not giving specific confidential legal advice or communications to any specific person. So there is no attorney-client privilege that applies here. Run tell that. All right. So I guess the only other housekeeping things for anybody who might be new here is that this is a live stream for a reason. That is so that we can address your questions in real time. So please, please, please do not be shy about asking those questions. Plop them in the chat box. We will get them and we will address them. We will also not be shy. If there's something that we can't answer, or, or we have to get back to you about, we'll tell you that. But yeah. So with that, what are we doing? Should we jump into it?
I believe we shall.
All
So,
right.
like you said, we're talking about the beneficiaries today. And so, what our aim is on the front end that you should be able to walk away with is who it is, what their powers are, and what the limitations of being a beneficiary is. Yeah, beneficiary is. All of a sudden, it seemed like is are. But you follow me.
Listen, I'm just watching your journey. Like you were you were on a whole road there. I was like, well, let me tune in. What?
It's the it's very much the law school professor that I had who said, "Think aloud, take us on the journey with you." Apparently, I was well trained, so welcome to the journey, friends.
Yeah.
So, who the beneficiaries are, like when we think about who that person is, that is like the seat of where all of this legacy lands. So, when we talk about the work of legacy and that we are passing things down, the beneficiaries are the people that we are passing these things to.
Or the entities.
So, yeah, people or entities. That's exactly my next sentence was going to be. It can be a person, it can be a place. So sometimes it's to people that you love and know, and sometimes it's to things like charities or foundations. So you actually get to decide, and it can even be a blend of those two things. It's certainly not a thing where you can only have one. You might be spreading it around amongst few people or even at different levels through different generations of
Right.
people.
And for folks who might have been here last week, you will have heard us say that there are certain elements that are required for a trust to be a trust. A beneficiary is one of them, right? So this role is super necessary. Super necessary. I like that. Right. I like that term. I'm just going to start saying super necessary because it's not enough for a thing to be necessary. It's not enough for it to be required. It's got to be like super required. Anyway, that was my own
It's like
journey.
my shoes, not just extra, uber extra. Take, take it to another level. That's super necessary.
I swear there is water in this tankard. There is water in here. Um, but but yeah, so a beneficiary is necessary for a trust to be a trust, which makes sense, right? Think about it. A trust is the container where we are holding the things for the benefit of somebody else or something else, right? Like I have it, but it's not mine. It's actually for them. I'm not going to give the coffee cup example again. I'm not going to do that to y'all again. But so a beneficiary is owed protection of their interests from the trustee, right? Because ultimately the trustee is there to hold this stuff for the beneficiary. And we'll talk more about the trustee in a couple of weeks. But this beneficiary role is required. Once a beneficiary's interest is vested, and I will explain what vested means, or one of us will explain it in just a minute. But once the beneficiary's interest is vested, then they are considered to have beneficial ownership of the stuff that's in the trust. So the trust will have legal ownership of it, right? So the title to the house, right? If my house is in my trust, the house title is going to be in the name of the trust, but it is for the benefit of the beneficiary because the trust exists for the benefit of the beneficiary. Tell me if that makes sense to you. Those of you who are here and watching, tell me if that concept makes sense to you. What vested means is that the thing that the people who have set up the trust have said needs to happen before a beneficiary can have access, or not access, but before a beneficiary can have rights to what's in the trust, it means that that thing has happened. So we call it a condition, right? The condition might be that that I died, right? So if I left an instruction in my trust that on my death, give my house to my child, right? Then my death is the condition. So my child doesn't have any rights to this house until I have passed away. It can also be, a beneficiary can also be vested in their interest even though they may not have access to what's in the trust until later. So if I gave the example, if I gave the instruction in my trust that on my death, give my child $100,000, but make it payable in 4 installments separated by 3 years. So give them one installment, then 3 years later, give them another installment, give them 3 years later, give them another installment, and so on. Well, on my death, the beneficiary, my child, is vested in the $100,000. They just can't have it all at once. The payment instructions are different, but they do get to have it, right? So that's what this concept of sort of being vested is. As long as in those examples where the condition was my death, as long as I'm alive, that beneficiary has got no rights. They can't do anything with this house. So those of you who might be beneficiaries of somebody's trust, where you're like, ooh, the trust exists for my benefit, do not run out and try to sell your mama's house. Don't do this. Do not do this. You will run into big problems. Do not go and try to cash in. You will get blocked. So so that's what that means. Tell me if you have questions about this. Those of you who are here, tell me if you have questions. Katrina said that that concept of the condition and the vesting made sense to her. Thank you, Katrina, for that feedback. Yeah, Alicia, do you want to jump in here? Because otherwise I'll just be talking. Child, I'll just be up here talking.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point that you're making, though, about vesting. That is really critical and something that people don't often understand. And so we will, or I will say, it's not that they don't understand, they assume that they have more rights and power than what they have. So people will call and want to know about this and do this, that, and the other about mama and daddy's trust. And our first question is always, are mom and dad still alive? Because if they are, and that was the triggering event, which is pretty much usually the triggering event, particularly in the type of trust that we're talking about, a revocable living trust. When we talked about that in the overview before, we used the term probate avoidance trust. And so when we are talking about probate is because somebody has died. And so when we're thinking about that type of trust and you are a beneficiary, think of your name written very lightly in pencil as long as that person is alive. Because as long as they have capacity, you can be erased. And so that is why you don't have any rights and power there. So if it's well, I want to know this, that, and the other about the trust, and mom and dad are still alive, you don't get to know Jack. Like,
Exactly.
it's not yours, it's none of your business, and it doesn't belong to you.
Right. And that
So,
happens the other way too. So when people are setting up trusts, they'll frequently ask, okay, well, do I need to tell anybody about this? And the answer is no. The answer is no. It is your private information. In California, there's a state constitutional right to financial privacy, and so you don't have to share any information with
none of it.
anybody. I mean, zero, unless it's necessary to do business on behalf of the trust, right? Like if you need to go and change ownership of an asset or something like that, then obviously you need to share some information so that somebody can carry out the instructions that you're giving them. But in terms of giving information to the beneficiary or accounting to them or anything like that, it's a no.
Yeah. One of the other things that's interesting about the beneficiary role in particular, I think it's one of the only places that we've said it thus far in the different documents that we've talked about. To be a beneficiary, there is no mental capacity
Mm-hmm.
determination. You don't have to have capacity to name, or excuse me, I should say, the person whom you name as a beneficiary in your trust does not have to have mental capacity to be in that seat. Now, when we're thinking about their capacity and if there is a concern about it, we might need to structure differently how they get it. So while their interests may vest, the access to it may need to look different if there is a capacity concern there. But as far as just naming them as the beneficiary, no capacity required.
Yep. So,
Then,
oh, go ahead.
yeah, no, go for it.
Um, I was gonna say that one of the ways that if somebody is a beneficiary and they are they have special needs, they're going to be qualifying for government benefits that have an income test. So think like Alicia, give me the word. It starts
Social
with an
Security,
M.
disability,
Oh,
Medi-Cal, Medicare,
there we go.
Medicaid.
Medicaid, not Medicare. Yeah. I was like, what is the word? It starts with an M. There's water in here. It's water.
You're signing up for the $25,000 pyramid.
Right. Yeah. So some of you already know from your own experience that somebody might have too much money in order to qualify, or too much in assets in order to qualify for some of those programs. And so people make legal efforts to bring those assets out of that person's ownership, right? So that they can qualify for some of these necessary governmental benefits. A person can be a beneficiary even if they are qualifying for or receiving those benefits. There is a particular type of trust that is used or that can be used for that purpose. It is called a special needs trust or a supplemental needs trust, and we'll have a whole different episode about that because that's its own special animal. Okay, and it has its own rules and requirements and all of that stuff. The point here is just to know that even if somebody has some income limits, or they're trying to do something in their life or be provided for in their life in a way that means that their income has to be limited, then they can still be a beneficiary of this trust. And sometimes when we explain this to people, they they think that it's a little it's a little scammy, but it's not. I assure you, it is. It's completely on the up and up and totally legal. The
As
way
long as
that
it's set up correctly.
right. But the way that I encourage people to, or we encourage people to think about this is think about those income limits. If you have any experience with them, you know that they're really low. It's like, I mean, they're super low. It's really not. It's not enough money for anybody to actually be able to live on. But also think that, remember what Alicia said, that you don't have to get someone's permission. You don't have to give permission to be a beneficiary of someone's trust. You also don't have to have mental capacity to be a beneficiary of someone's trust. So, sort of the real world context is that I might intend to leave a gift for somebody in my family. The gift is not going to be enough money to set them up for life, right? It's just for me to bless them from what I've been blessed with, right? So it's not enough money to set them up for life, but what I intended to be a benefit for them could actually be a harm in terms of their ability to qualify for the benefits that they need to actually live, right? So it's helpful to sometimes think about it in that context. But like I said, the thing to know is that you can be a beneficiary and can receive assets or gifts from a trust, even if you need to, even if you are receiving government benefits. That is possible.
Yes. So, shifting gears a little bit, there are a couple of points that we talked about it last week, where we talked about these are the things that are required, but here's a little bit of extra to help avoid a mess. This also applies in the beneficiary context as well. These are super basic, but really important things. And I've seen questions of this coming up recently, even. So,
Ooh, before we shift gears, I saw a note.
yes,
There
yes.
was we included a note about defining the role in a way that can be helpful for creditor protection or divorce protection. Do you want to talk about that before we move into avoiding a mess?
You go for it. And then I'll shift to the avoiding the mess.
What that means is I speak fluent Holland, and what that means is you wrote that note. I don't know what you were thinking. You you talk about it.
Basically.
So the thing to know here is that the person or people who set up the trust get to decide how the beneficiary gets whatever they're going to get, right? And they also get to decide, like, what happens if conditions change. So for example, if my child is married to someone and I say, you know what, this gift of my granny's Bible that I want to go to my child, I want to make sure that that Bible stays in the family, right? I can, in setting up my trust, I can specify that, I can specify terms in the trust that will keep that Bible in the family. So even though my child is the beneficiary, I can restrict my child's rights to transfer that Bible to their spouse, to their ex-spouse, right? If, because people get divorced sometimes, so I can actually specify restrictions on how the beneficiary can transfer the thing that I am giving them. I can also set up the trust in a way that restricts the beneficiary's access. so that while the thing is in trust, it is not reachable by their creditors, right? So those things, the specifics of how to do that are, I think, beyond, I think that's outside the scope of this conversation. But the point is to know that a beneficiary has they have some limitations. We'll talk more about limitations in a bit, but just because I am giving someone something, or as a beneficiary, I am entitled to receive something from a trust, as the beneficiary, I do not get to control how I receive it. The trust controls how I receive it. Does that make sense? Tell me if it does or if it does not. And so, because I have limited, as the beneficiary, I have limited ability to control how I get things from the trust. It allows it allows some other things to be possible in planning, and we'll talk more specifically about some of those things when we talk about the grantor role. That remember, the grantor is the person or people who are setting up the trust. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? I'm asking a lot if it makes sense today because I think we're talking about more technical things today than we sometimes do. So let me know that we are in the same conversation, or if we are not in the same conversation anymore, definitely send up a flare.
Let us know
Okay,
that too.
right?
Yeah.
Um, Go ahead, Alicia. I'm
One
sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that was important because I think one thing that when you said that, a thing that came to mind that I don't think we've talked about as specifically, but thinking about that, for instance, the creditor protection or the I don't like that in-law spouse protection, but I want this to go to my kid, or I want my kid to have the benefit of it, then something like that might be maybe the house. And I want my kid to have the benefit of the house, but maybe they have some creditor issue that they are trying to work through, or vindictive spouse, or we're in the process of getting rid of vindictive spouse legally, something of that
I love
nature.
that legally.
Then yeah, well, you know.
No, I do not, and I do not know what you're trying to imply, ma'am.
But sometimes what that can show up as is maybe we need to, in the trust, give that person, talking about that access and rights thing, like I might give my kid a right of occupancy in the house, for instance, but it's still owned by the trust. And so that would be something where they get to live in it and have all of the benefit of it. So they are a beneficiary of my trust, but it is still an asset that is owned by my trust. And so when we talk about these tools and how they can be used, it's not just as simple as um, well, I shouldn't say simple. It's not as restrictive as all I can do is say, give this to that person. Like you have so much power in how this is set up. And so that beneficiary role, and we're talking about some of those rights and limitations, this is where all of those things start coming into play because it actually matters what the paper says for what your interest is and when it vests. So knowing those things, like that is why, even though this is technical, it's important to understand that there's more to it than just, I'm going to get some stuff.
Right. And you can think of the trust in that way then. I mean, you can think of the trust as like Nene Leaks, right? On the Real Housewives. The trust is saying, I said what I said. Okay? And so in that
That
way,
was nicely done. I would have never thought of it.
in
Nene
that
leaks and trust.
right. I mean, what is the law without pop culture? But the beneficiary is bound by what the trust said. Okay, so as far as the beneficiary discussion is concerned, that's the takeaway. We'll talk more about sculpting the trust and how you can do that when we talk about the grantor role. And remember that the grantor is the person or people who set up the trust.
Yeah. No, that was perfect. Because in the vein of I said what I said, couple of things to avoid a mess so that there is no question about you said what you said. is
To say it.
include the full legal name of the person, paying particular attention to if we are giving things to folks that have either common names or there are multiple folks in the family that have that name. Think the junior, senior, third, fourth, fifth of somebody. Also include a birthday. So if it says it's going to James Washington, then are we talking James Washington Jr. or James Washington Sr.? Like, give us some help here. What are we doing here? So, including those names and being really clear about what it is that you want for that person to have. If it is something that is highly specific personal property, so thinking of, for instance, Great Granny's Bible, you might even include a picture of it so that we don't have any question. That can also come into play if we're talking about things like jewelry items. And so if it's my gold necklace, but if I open your jewelry box and there are all manner of gold necklaces, help your people out. It cuts down on the fighting and the fuss, so that when somebody brings in the Nene Leaks defense of I said what I said, we can have confidence in exactly what you said
And just
and that
a
we know what it is.
right. And just a practical note here, some of some things we give because they have sentimental value, right? So this might not apply to it, this won't apply to everything, but make use of the information that you already have on hand. So, for example, in the example that Alicia gave about the gold necklace or about the jewelry, 9 times out of 10, if this is jewelry that is that has a particular value, a dollar value that you want to be insured, there's probably a picture and an appraisal of it in your document somewhere because your insurance carrier said we need that appraisal in order to make sure this thing is actually worth what you're trying to insure it for, right? So you don't have to go to a whole bunch of extra lengths to identify some of these things. You probably have some of this stuff, some of this information already on hand, and it's perfectly okay to use that.
Yeah, 100%. Then now let's talk about the power. You got the power. You got the power. So we're talking about
We are on one today. What's in your
a
cup,
little
friend?
bit, just a little water, but I had 2 cups of coffee
Oh
and
hey,
breakfast.
oh hey.
This what you get. So, thinking about the rights and powers of those beneficiaries. So, we talked about that concept of vesting and that really key point that Jill gave you the example of is that you do not have any right until your interest in it has vested. But once it has vested, then that actually triggers some rights as a beneficiary. So you have a right to some information. You have a right to information about your interest, about the trust itself. You have a right to a full copy of the trust. So you don't just have to take the person's word for it that says, well, you're a beneficiary. It says you get a little stuff in there and you'll find out later. That's not how this works. They have to give you a copy of the entire trust. And so you have a right to demand it. The other things that you have rights to include things like an accounting. So if it is maybe I'm getting an interest in the trust, but I don't get it all at once, so it's over those stages of time, then I am entitled to an accounting. In California, what our rule says is at a minimum every year you're entitled to an accounting, which means that you get to see, think like your bank statement balance. Show me the beginning, show me the end, and show me what happened to all of the stuff in the middle. You have a right to see those so that you can make sure, because we said at the very front, a beneficiary is entitled to some protection and that their interest is protected. And so what you're looking for in that information and accounting is making sure that the interest that has now vested as yours is being properly protected and properly managed, that it's not just being left to sit there and waste for no reason just because somebody doesn't feel like dealing with it. So you have rights to knowing those things, and you have a right to take action about those things if something is amiss or something is awry. So if you have, if you're not getting this information voluntarily, the information, the accounting, things of that nature, then you have a right, number one, to make a demand for it. So you can say, hey, you ain't told me nothing in 3 years. What's going on? You have a right to do that. And if you still don't get a response from that person who it's the trustee that you're making this demand to, then you actually have a right to go to court so that you can get a court order to either force them to provide the information, and if necessary, if it gets real bad, then to even seek a court order to have that person removed from the job, because your interest has to be protected and they owe you an obligation to do that. So if they are falling down on the duty, then you have the power to get them out of the job so that we can get somebody else in it to comply.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it's really important because the ultimately the beneficiary is, I mean, it's a really powerful role in this trust thing, but it is dependent. The beneficiary is dependent on the terms of the trust, what the trust says. I said what I said is actually what rules the day. And if you think about that, like, the law goes to a whole lot of effort to require certain things in order for a trust to be the trust, right? And we talked about that last week. So if you have questions about that, pop back to that episode and then reach out to us. But once those requirements are met, the law is satisfied that this trust container thing is a trust container thing. And so what's in it, we are going to protect that. Okay? As long as what's in your trust is not some illegal mess. Okay? Like, it can be crazy mess, but it cannot be illegal mess. But
There's the difference.
right, the law is going to protect that. So this "I said what I said" thing is actually, it actually is a big deal in the land and law of trust. So the beneficiary is dependent on what the trust says. Their rights are dependent on what the trust says, but they're also dependent on somebody else to carry this out. And so in that way, the beneficiary role is kind of a passive role. Other people and other things have to do the work of making sure that the beneficiary gets what is lawfully theirs. And so if you think about it that way, then it makes all the sense in the world. And I love the example of the bank statement. It makes all the sense in the world that the beneficiary would be entitled to information, because otherwise, how do they make sure that they are getting what they're supposed to get, or that they are that the terms of the trust are being complied with, right? If you didn't get a bank statement, how would you know what the bank did with your money? Right? You want to know that. So there we go. There are some, I think we've woven in, Alicia, limitations throughout the conversation.
Yeah, one thing too that we haven't said explicitly on the power side of it that I think it's important to note is sometimes people are hesitant to set up a trust because they're concerned about, well, what happens if my trustee doesn't do what I want them to do, or they abscond, they steal the money, something like that. And so it's important to know, as a beneficiary, you have rights with that too. So if the person that is sitting in the seat is taking some of the money, or is doing something hinky, or is saying, oh, well, there's nothing left for you because I decided to pay myself for being in this seat, and so after I paid me, there was nothing left for you, then you get to go to court. You have the right for that too, to get a court order to make sure that things look right. So if something doesn't look right in that bank statement, you can do something about it. Yeah. You have a right to do that as a beneficiary.
Right. Once you're vested. Once your interest is vested.
Once you're vested, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you're to your point, you are right with the limits that we really have woven those things in. The fact that your powers and rights don't kick in until you're vested. That is one of the limitations. And then when we talked about these powers, one of the things that we just talked about, where I said going to court multiple times. And so that really highlights one of the limits as a beneficiary is while you have a right to those things, those pieces of information, once you make the request, kind of the I sent you a letter and you didn't give it to me, then your next step of action is you have to go to court in order to enforce those things. So you need, in order to give it some teeth and backbone, it is going to require you to go somewhere to do that.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing in those limitations is that you don't have a right to make power independent actions about trust property. So thinking of the example that we gave a few minutes ago where I might have a right of occupancy to the property. So it is a house that is owned by the trust, and in the Nene Leaks trust law, it said that I get to live in it. I'm allowed to live there, but it does not belong to me. It still belongs to the trust. That means I can't independently decide to go and sell that house so that I can get the money. I can talk to the trustee about it to see if the trust has the option of doing that, but I cannot go to the realtor and put my little for sale by owner sign in the yard because I don't own that thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so you don't get, as a beneficiary, you don't get to take independent actions when it comes to the things that are trust property.
Yep.
Did
Yep.
I
Yep.
forget
Yep.
any limits?
I don't think so. I think that you covered them well. Um, I want to make some room, or just remind folks that there is room for questions if you have them, or concerns or confusions. If you have those, because like we said, this is probably a more technical conversation than we always have. So that's okay. I mean, some of this stuff is technical. We try to be as plain spoken about it as we can, because the point is not for us to understand it. The point is for you to understand it, and and importantly, to be able to explain it to somebody else. That's the goal. That's the goal, to be able to get it and explain it to somebody else. My husband used to teach middle school, and he would say that if you can't explain it to a middle schooler, then you don't understand it well enough. So, um,
That's pretty accurate.
yeah. So while you all are getting your questions together or mulling them over, if you have them, um, I will just put in a quick reminder that over the next 2 weeks, we will be talking about the other roles in the trust. So we will be talking about that grantor role. This is the person or people who set up the trust. We will be talking about that trustee role. This is the person who is holding the stuff, right? On behalf of, in trust, on behalf of the beneficiaries. So you can, just to give you sort of a tee up, the example that I might use for a trustee and to put me in mind of what their responsibilities are. Think of when your grandmother, when you were in the church pew and your grandmother had to excuse herself to her usher duties or to go to the restroom or something like that, and she handed you her handbag. You were the trustee. Now, what are your rights and responsibilities with regard to that handbag? That's what I think of when I think of a trustee. That's how I understand it, because let something
And
happen.
you knew there was going to be consequences.
Let something happen to Granny's handbag. Let some just do that here. so, so we'll be talking about both of those trust roles. Of course, we are going to try to leave you with some action items to do. Sometimes it's a thing to go and do. Sometimes it's a thing to go and think about. And I think that today's action items might be a bit of a combination of both. So Alicia's going to walk us through that.
We got a combination plate. So we have another think about it assignment. So last week we asked you to think about the things that you would want to include in a trust and the people that you might want those things to go to. So now we're actually identifying the who for specific things. So we're taking those two that we had last time and starting to assign them to folks that we would want them to go to. And then that leads us to the thing that actually requires potentially some action from you. And what that is start identifying full legal names for those people. Now that we're starting to assign those things to folks in our head, let's start gathering the information of the full legal names and the birth dates for those folks so that when we list them, we will have as much as complete information as possible to help our trustee with making sure that they are able to carry out our instructions.
Yep. And that's, I mean, that actually can be more important than it might seem than it might seem like it is, because people have common names, people have nicknames, families are dispersed, people live all over the place. So I mean, one of my cousins who I absolutely love, I don't know, I just have really loving relationships with my cousins. I love them. But one of my cousins, we have called her Mike our whole life. I was a young adult before I knew that Mike's name was Rhonda. Like, it's not, it actually matters what the identifying documents will say that a person's name is. Your name is whatever you say it is, and I'm fine with that. But being able, in order for your trustee, in order for the trustee to be able to carry out their duty and make sure that they are getting the trust assets to the right person, that set them up, set your people up, your beneficiaries up, well, to be able to receive what they're supposed to have from the trust.
That also really applies to last names too.
Mm-hmm.
So that is really common where you just assume that so and so's last name is same as X,
Mm-hmm.
mama, daddy, whomever, but to actually find those things out. And so it might require asking a question, but what does your government ID say? Let's try to match that name up and birth date so that we can make sure that we are landing with the right person.
Right. And then also known as is fine. So Rhonda, also
Yeah.
known as Mike, that's fine. Actually, it's really helpful.
Yeah.
So that your trustee knows that they got the right person, and Mike's ability to receive what I intend for her to have in my trust is protected.
You got it. Do we have any questions?
No, we don't have any questions right now. I think that people are feeling pretty complete on these ideas.
Woohoo.
So I say, let's go ahead and close it out. You all, thank you so much for your time and attention. As always, thank you for being here. I mean, you could be doing anything else, and that you've chosen to be here with us talking about these topics is not something that we take lightly, and we never intend to waste your time. So I hope that this information is useful. If it is not, please tell us, and so that we can course correct or redirect or stop. But if it is useful, then please tell somebody else. Please share this information widely, and direct people here, because they can get this information directly so that they'll be equipped to share it with somebody else as well. If you are like us, and sometimes questions don't come up until you hang up the phone, right? That's me every single day. I hang up the phone and go, I meant to ask XYZ. Anyway, if that's you, no worries. You can reach out to us by email. You can reach out to us at You can reach out to us on Instagram. You can reach out to us on our website. I will drop all of that information in the chat box, but our email is dlg@dahlialawgroup.com. Our website is dahlialawgroup.com, and on Instagram, you can find us at Dahlia Law Group. Anything else, Alicia?
That's it.
Excellent. Excellent, excellent. Well, thanks you all. We will see you back here next Wednesday at 12:30 Pacific, 3:30 Eastern, and we'll be continuing the conversation about the trust roles. Next week we'll be talking about grantor. So show back up here, and we'll see you then.